Welcome back everyone. Let's go ahead and talk about the Google Pixel 4 and see how it holds up in 2021. Now, this phone kind of represented the beginning and end of a specific point within Google's own manufacturing lineup and just their phones. I don't understand what they were trying to do with this phone. I think it was an okay phone, to be honest, but I honestly think they just kind of messed up in the release cycle. They should have kept it at a cheaper price tag. They should have done a Pixel 5 on this specific phone, but they didn't. They sold it as a flagship type of device, which it wasn't. Now, these things have depreciated quite a bit and you can get them for much cheaper in the used market, so I'll find the cheapest ones of these. I'll probably leave a Pixel 5 and some other devices in the description below. You can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now, on the front of the Google Pixel 4, we did have a 5.7-inch OLED panel, and at the end of the day, this was a pretty good panel. I don't think it was bad. You did have the 90Hz refresh rate on it too, which was pretty cool, and I actually do think the panel of it was a strong suit. Even though it was only 1080p, it was still a pretty okay 1080p, and I'll be honest, like having the, bezel up top really didn't bother me too much. I think it did bother some people at the time, but this did come out in 2019, and Apple is still doing notches. Apple was still doing notches at that point too, so it's not really a big deal to me. It's a little bit over a year old, but I'll definitely tell you the panel of it is probably one of its bigger assets, to be completely honest. Now, on the bottom, you do have that USB Type-C port, which is very interesting. No headphone jack. And on the back, you had this kind of like glass aluminum. I don't think it was glass, but it was kind of like a matte texture on the back. And funny enough, I actually loved this. I typically love like glass backs, especially frosted glass backs, but this specific back on this device really wasn't that bad, and I actually really did like it. It kind of felt more like a case that was over the phone, but it didn't feel like a bad case. And I'll be honest, it actually felt pretty good. And overall, the feeling of the hand in this specific device is probably one of the better aspects. And I've said this before and I'll say it again, but when you have a device like this, I think the best things about the Pixel phones were the software. But at the time, Pixel lineup, was kind of known for its camera. And the Pixel 3 XL, the Pixel 3, the Pixel 2, the original Pixel, year after year was really the biggest aspect of this phone was the camera. And unfortunately, with this specific device, Google kind of dropped the ball in that specific area. Even though it was still a pretty okay camera, they took a different approach, which should have never been taken, and they, insulted a lot of different things too. So the buildup of this phone was just such a flop in so many ways. And I actually like the Pixel 4. I like the 4 XL as well, but because of the price tag and because of what you were getting, it honestly just didn't make any sense. And obviously we know this now because Google with the Pixel 5 and Pixel 4a are taking a cheaper, kind of more budget phone approach, which I think is actually much smarter for them to do to get their Pixel phones in the most amount of hands as possible. Now, on the camera side, which I've already kind of hit on, I can definitely tell you, I thought it was a good camera, but it definitely wasn't that great. Like I said, with Google, all their eggs were in this camera basket. Year after year, 2016, 2017, 2018, the Pixel phone had the best quality photos and just the best cameras in general. And at this point, they did two different things. One, they didn't add the ultra-wide sensor and they kind of insulted it at the same time during their keynote. So that already kind of made the Pixel 4 kind of flop in a way. But also, no 4K at 60 on the back, when on a lot of other phones in the market, even in 2019, the Galaxy S10, the iPhone 11 Pro, that came out that year, the iPhone 11, those phones could do 4K at 60 on the front, where we couldn't even do 4K at 60 on the back of the Pixel 4, which was so crazy to me. So that's why, and it wasn't like the Pixel 4 or 4 XL were super cheap. These were still pretty expensive devices at the end of the day. So those are huge things to keep in mind. And this was the first year in a long time that the Pixel lineup just wasn't really a contender for the best camera of that year. And that really kind of made me upset because I love the Pixel phones, but this specific lineup, I don't know what Google is trying to do. Now, you still have a lot of capability for the most part. You can do 1080p at 120 frames on the back, and most people still shoot 1080p video, so it's totally okay. But just having the capability of stepping it up to 4K at 60, now 8K is kind of becoming, the feature to have, and you're kind of already outdated if you get the Pixel 4. Now, quality photos and quality videos are actually pretty good for the most part. I really don't think it's, a bad, camera at all. I don't think that at all. But when you look at the competitor, especially even today in 2020, ultra-wide sensors, telephoto lenses, you have a ton of sensors. With the iPhone 11 Pro that came out at this year, which this one thing was kind of like a competitor towards that phone, you had a lot of capability with that specific lens. And that was a much better camera, in my opinion, than the Pixel 4 and 4 XL. So specifically with the Google Pixel 4, I feel like Google could have done a little bit of a better job, in my opinion. But again, there's nothing we can do about it. They have kind of learned their lesson with the Pixel 5. But again, it would have been really cool had we seen some type of Pixel 4, with an ultra-wide sensor and the best camera of that year. So in terms of camera setup, that pretty much covers it up. Now, I'll go ahead and hit on the software, the battery life, and that type of, performance. And this thing, the biggest asset for the Pixel lineup is the software. This thing originally came out with Android 10. Right now it's on Android 11. It's going to be getting Android 12 and then probably Android 13. So this thing still has a long lifetime ahead of it. Like, it's not ending anytime soon. And even when it does end with official support, you're still going to be getting, custom ROMs and all that good stuff. So this phone is really never going to die. It's going to live on pretty much forever as long as you have some type of customizability behind it. Now, compared to iOS, it's definitely not as long. But for an Android, this is the iPhone of Android. This is going to be getting software updates for a very, very long time. And it gets monthly updates all the time too, which are really cool. So in terms of the software side, the Pixel lineup definitely wins. This is the best thing about the Pixel 4 it has going for it in 2021 is the software. And I just think, when you have a device like this, there's really a huge reason to upgrade. If you are okay with the performance, if you're okay with the battery life, if you're okay with the camera, then this is the cream of the crop when it comes down to software. Obviously, the Pixel 4 and the Pixel 5 are probably going to be lasting longer potentially, but this device, when it comes down to the software, is its huge, probably one of its biggest assets. But in terms of the battery life, this is an area where it kind of flopped in, 2800 mAh battery. Now, luckily, the software does actually help out in terms of the battery standpoint. So I think that's a really strong thing. Again, the best thing about the Pixel 4 in 2021 is the software. One of the worst things besides the camera is the battery. It just doesn't do so well, especially if you have that 90 Hz refresh rate enabled. To give you some perspective, the iPhone 11 Pro, which iPhones typically have super small batteries for the most part, this thing actually had a smaller battery than the iPhone 11 Pro at that point, and the iPhone 11 and the Samsung Galaxy S10e. Like, this thing had a smaller battery than all those other devices. And again, it doesn't really make any sense to me why Google did that. But this device, at the end of the day, is kind of like a mixed bag, because the best thing about it was the software, and luckily the software does optimize the hardware a little bit, including the battery life. But I just feel like the battery just didn't do so well for the Pixel 4 specifically. So in terms of the battery life and software, that pretty much covers it up. Now, performance wise, the Google Pixel 4 of that year had the Qualcomm Snapdragon 855 chipset, which was the latest chipset at the time from Snapdragon. They also had the Adreno 640 GPU and 6 gigs of RAM on each model. And here's the other issue that I have with it, and it's probably another huge issue, and it's probably another humongous issue. There was only 2 different storage models of this device, the 64 gig and the 128 gig models. There was no, 256, and there was no micro SD card slot on this thing either. So you were pretty tapped out of storage on this thing, even with the top tier model. So that was another big issue in my opinion. Now, performance wise, overall, you're going to be getting a pretty smooth performing phone for the most part. Like I said before, I don't think the performance was a bad thing on this phone. It had pretty good RAM, and because it was a Pixel phone, it didn't have a lot of background processes. You could pretty much just, even have a little bit less RAM than the Galaxy S10 that came out the same year, but still get better RAM management performance, mostly because Android 10 was optimized for the Pixel 4 at that time, and it gave you a much better experience. So that's another pretty big thing to keep in mind. The performance you're going to get from the Pixel 4 overall is going to be much better than the performance that you're going to be getting from really any other device for the most part, respectively, from this year. You know what I mean? I think obviously like the OnePlus 7 Pro is going to be better, but when you mix in, the RAM this thing had and the smoothness factor with that 90 Hz refresh rate, I think that was definitely one of my favorite aspects for sure. The Galaxy S10 of that year didn't have, a higher refresh rate. The OnePlus 7 Pro had a higher refresh rate, but the software still, I take that back. I think the OnePlus 7 Pro, the 7T Pro, those were the faster phones of that year, but the Pixel 4 was still surprisingly smooth. It was still surprisingly fast, and I definitely don't think the performance was a bad thing about the Pixel 4 of that year. So in terms of performance, that pretty much covers it up. Now, to kind of sum up the video and to answer the question, should you go and pick up a Pixel 4, a Google Pixel 4 in 2021? Well, this is what I'll tell you. I think if you don't have any other option, or if there's a specific reason why you want to pick up the Pixel 4, then I'll say go for it. I think the front screen of the Pixel 4 is actually pretty good. I think the fact that this thing has wireless charging and an okay camera on the front and back, I think is good too. But I think you're going to be picking this phone up because of the software, because you like stock Android. But I want to ask yourself, I would recommend you asking yourself this question. Is there any other reason why you want to pick up, a Google Pixel 4 that a OnePlus 7 Pro or even a OnePlus 7T, that those phones can't fulfill your need? Because I'll be honest, I would way rather have a OnePlus 7 Pro than a Pixel 4. I would rather have a OnePlus 7 Pro, probably even more than a Pixel 5, to be completely honest. That phone has a lot of capability and it just looks so timeless. And that's not necessarily a knock to the Pixel 5 or to the Pixel 4, but that's a huge thing to consider. I think the Pixel 4 was underwhelming. I think, with the camera we were expecting a lot, with the, price tag that Google set this thing at, I think it was a very weird thing. They shouldn't have priced it at the way it was. And I think if they kept it a little bit cheaper, then it would have been competing more so with like the iPhone 12s and maybe like the base OnePlus 7. But because this phone was competing with the Galaxy S10s and the iPhone 11 Pros and all those other devices, that really didn't set this phone up too well, if I'm being completely honest. And I think at the end of the day, the Pixel 4 is probably not a good phone to pick up anymore. It's good if you want to keep it, if you want to continue to use it, but I would recommend probably picking up a OnePlus 7T Pro. It's a little bit more expensive or around the same price. I would way recommend picking up a Galaxy S10. That phone is also timeless, but I love stock Android and I still love the Pixel 4. We just kind of have a bittersweet relationship, if I'm being honest. So that really pretty much covers it up. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count. So it means so much if you guys can hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.